Okay guys, I'm still working on the beans. I'm getting ready to put them in the canner. But I've got this bowl almost full. And I thought, well, I'll show you what I'm doing. So what I'm doing first is I'm cutting both ends off. As I get those cut off, I know I could snap them, but it's going faster with the scissors. I just snap them into bite-sized pieces and toss them into my bowl. And see, it's just these, I don't want to waste too much of my bean cutting off the ends. So it's just so much easier to do it this way. I've got a tea kettle with water getting ready to boil. I've got my Tatler and metal rings. They're in a pan. I'm going to let the water come up and get hot. I'm not going to boil them, but with Tatler, remember, you want to get that rubber ring soft so you can get a good seal. I've got my canner with the recommended amount of water in it, and my jars have been washed and rinsed in hot water. When you're pressure canning, you don't have to sanitize or sterilize your jars like you do in water bath or steam canning. However, of course, I still want them as clean as I can get them. Wish I had a sanitized thing on my dishwasher, so it just make me feel better. But, so anyway, I raw pack my beans. I'm lazy. Hot packing is you blanch them, I'm not sure, for a matter of minutes. And from my understanding is the hot pack method, they're more of a vibrant green or yellow, and all I care about is flavor. Okay guys, yes, I washed my hands. I use my hands. I mean, I could use a spoon and be sitting here all day getting a spoonful. As you can see, I'm mixing my yellow and green together. I read a little bit on what's the difference between yellow beans and green beans. Green beans have chlorophyll, and they taste the same, so I don't care about the color so much. But what I'm going to do first is get them as full as I can, and pack them in fairly tight. You know, you don't want to shove them in there till they're broke, but I'll get them in there fairly tight because once I add the water and debubble, I'm going to have to add more beans. So let me finish getting all my jars full and I'll come back. Okay, I had planned to do all pints because I wasn't sure how many I would have, but I ended up with 2 quarts and 3 pints. And it's just the old farmer and I, but I still like to have quarts when we have company, or there's many times I'll bring a quart of beans up and then we'll just have them for several days in a row. I've packed the beans in tight. I have a few left in the bowl over here because I can tell I'm probably going to need a few more to top off. You want to leave 1-inch headspace. And I do want to point out, yes, I know some of my beans are really small, but when we get out there and get to picking and going through, we just get what looks like they're almost ready. I don't always add salt when I'm canning, but there are a few things that I do it for the flavor, and it does make a difference. Beans are one of them. I add, well, that's too big. Most recipes call for a ½ teaspoon of salt in a pint and a teaspoon of salt in a quart. Now remember, when you're canning, I use Morton canning salt, but it's okay to use kosher salt or any non-iodized salt. I've seen some people use Himalayan pink salt. I haven't switched to that yet. I'm still trying to decide if I want to get rid of my iodized table salt and go with pink salt. Hopefully that'll happen, but we'll see. So I'm going to add not quite as much as it calls for, maybe 3/4 a teaspoon to the quarts, and then just under a ½ teaspoon for the pints. Again, I do it for the flavor, and it really does make a big difference. I've I've got my tea kettle of boiling water. Youch, it's hot. So I'm going to fill it. I'll just do one jar first and then finish the rest. I'm going to fill it to 1 inch from the top, and which is this big ring on the bottom. I don't measure anymore. I used to, but you know, you can kind of eyeball it nowadays, or I can after all these years. Then I'm going to use kind of a chopstick thing here. Make sure you debubble really well. You want to get all the air pockets out of there. We're going to go around, make sure all that's done. There's a lot of recipes out there for all kinds of seasoning in green beans. And as the summer goes on, I'm sure I'll do a few of those, like onions, garlic. Some people add bacon grease. Now, if you do that, I doubt I'm going to do that. But if you do that, you're going to have to can it for meat. So, as you can see, my level went down a little bit. My beans are up there, but my water level, I need just a bit more. So, I'm going to top it off to 1 inch from the top. I've got a paper towel that I've dipped in the hot water. It's actually the water in my canner is what I use this time. Sometimes I just dip it in the hot water from my rings. And then I'm going to get, yowza, a hot lid. As you can see, I'm using Tatler. Now, this is how I do it. I've done a video on it. I go down finger tight. I tighten the lid finger tight, and then I back it off a bit, about 1/4 of a turn. And into the canner it's going to go. Okay, I'm going to finish filling all of these jars. I'll top them off just like I did with water. If they need more beans, I've got beans to add. And get them debubbled, the lid's on, and into the canner, and then I'll come back. Okay, my canner's full. I've got all my jars in there. And I'm getting ready to put my lid on. I did it without showing you, but you want to apply a very light coating of oil. I've heard mineral oil, Vaseline, I use olive oil. Just a very thin coating on the seal. Now, these All-Americans do not have rubber rings or rubber seals, so essentially they'll last forever. You also want to make sure that your vent hole, this is clear. A lot of people look through them, make sure they can see through them. And it's just a good practice to wash your canner after each canning session. Because even though you may not notice that you had any siphonage or food particles get out, there's usually a little bit. So on these All-Americans, oops, I need to turn it around. I have it backwards on the stove. Okay, I got it turned around. On these All-Americans, there's a little indentation on the canner, and on the lid, there's an arrow. So you want these to line up, and you set that on and you twist it. You tighten down the lid by going crisscross, directly across. So you bring these up, you don't tighten it totally down. You want to get them all set on there first. And now that I've got them all on there, I'm going to tighten them down so I get a good seal. I've got my heat up on high, and I'm going to let it go for until the vent starts to vent a steady stream of steam. And it will vent out the steam. You do that for 10 minutes. Okay, now it's venting that steam, and it's hot. I'm going to set my kitchen timer and let that go for 10 minutes. That's important that you let it vent that steam out to make sure you get all the air and all of that out so your pressure canner can build up the pressure that's required. So I'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, the 10 minutes are up, and now I'm going to add the weight to the top. You'll need to check for your altitude what is the proper weight. For years and years, I thought it was 10 pounds for my altitude, but I learned a few years ago, no, it's 15. So now I'm going to let that set, and once it starts to jiggle and my pressure gets up to about 12, 13, then I'll back the heat off. Okay, the weight has begun jiggling. My pressure's up to about 13 pounds. So I'm going to turn my heat back, and once I get this to where it's where I want it to be, there it goes. I got a full-on jiggle there. Then I'm going to time it for 25 minutes. Remember, we put pints and quarts in there, and so you want to do it for the one that takes the longest time. So we'll do 25 minutes processing time, and then we'll shut off the heat. 40 minutes are up, so turn off the heat, and now you're just going to let it come back down to 0 pressure on its own. Don't move it. Don't try to put it in cold water. Don't do anything to rapidly reduce the pressure. Don't remove the weight, blah, blah, blah. That'll result in the broken jars, plus that's just part of the processing time. So when we get down to 0 pressure and the canner is cooled off, I'll come back and we'll check our beans. Okay, the pressure is down to 0, and it's still pretty warm, but if I lift this weight off and it still, hisses or whatever, that means it's not 0 pressure. But if there's no sound, then I know it's safe to take off. No sound. So now what I'm going to do is go around, take it off the same way I put it on, crisscross. Okay, always remember to open your canner lid away from you, because there will be some steam that comes out. And you don't want to get blasted in the face. All right, now remember on the Tattler lids, I use pot holders. You want to tighten the lid down when you take it out of the canner. Right, I've tightened down all my Tattler lids. You can see it's still boiling in there. That's a good sign. That means it's good and hot. Whoop, and my one lid just pinged. So, now let me show you a picture of our finished product. You'll see my pickles sitting there, but these will set overnight, and then tomorrow I will wash them in warm soapy water and rinse them off, label them, and down in the pantry they go.